Imagine a clear summer's day in London. The sun shines brightly, casting a warm glow over the historic skyline. The city is alive with energy, its iconic landmarks standing tall against the azure sky. Tourists crowd the streets, eager to see the sights. They wander through bustling markets, take photos in front of Big Ben, and marvel at the grandeur of Buckingham Palace. The air is filled with laughter and the hum of conversations in various languages. Suddenly, a blinding flash changes everything. In an instant, the vibrant cityscape is disrupted by an overwhelming burst of light, more intense than anything the city has ever seen. A mushroom cloud rises over the city, casting a dark shadow over the land. The once clear sky is now filled with a menacing plume, a stark contrast to the peaceful day that preceded it. This is the terrifying reality of a nuclear attack, a scenario we must strive to prevent. The aftermath is a scene of utter devastation, with buildings reduced to rubble and streets unrecognizable. This is the potential consequence of a 1,000-kiloton nuclear missile detonating over London. The sheer power of such a blast is almost unimaginable, capable of leveling entire neighborhoods in an instant. The devastation would be immediate and catastrophic. The initial explosion would obliterate everything in its vicinity, leaving nothing but a wasteland in its wake. Millions of lives would be lost, families torn apart, communities shattered, and the very fabric of society irreparably damaged. The human cost is beyond comprehension. The city, and indeed the world, would be forever changed. The long-term effects of such an event would ripple through generations, altering the course of history. The landscape would be scarred, both physically and emotionally, a constant reminder of the fragility of peace. Command, currently the VO is 310 words long. From launch to impact, a nuclear missile follows a terrifyingly efficient trajectory. Launched from Russia, a 1,000-kiloton weapon could reach London in approximately 12 minutes. This leaves almost no time for reaction, no time for warnings or evacuation. The missile, traveling at hypersonic speeds, would be largely undetectable. Its arrival would be announced by the blinding flash of the explosion itself. This underscores the terrifying reality of nuclear weapons. Their speed and power leave little room for defense. The detonation of a 1,000-kiloton nuclear weapon over London would unleash an unimaginable inferno. The sheer magnitude of the explosion would be beyond anything humanity has ever witnessed. The initial blinding flash would be visible for miles, signaling the beginning of a catastrophic event. The initial blast would vaporize everything within a 2-mile radius. This means that buildings, vehicles, and even people would be instantly turned to vapor. The power of the explosion would be so immense that it would create a massive shockwave, flattening everything in its path. Buildings would crumble, bridges would collapse, and the streets would be filled with fire. The infrastructure of the city would be decimated in seconds, leaving behind a landscape of ruin and chaos. The once bustling streets would be unrecognizable, transformed into a scene of utter devastation. The heat from the explosion would be so intense that it would ignite fires for miles around. These fires would spread rapidly, consuming everything in their path. The combination of intense heat and spreading flames would create a deadly environment, making it nearly impossible for anyone to escape. These fires, fueled by the debris of the city, would rage for days, creating a firestorm of unimaginable proportions. The firestorm would generate its own wind system, drawing in oxygen and feeding the flames. This self-sustaining inferno would continue to burn, causing further destruction and loss of life. The air itself would become superheated, making survival within this zone impossible. The extreme temperatures would incinerate anything and anyone caught within the blast radius. The combination of heat, fire, and radiation would create a lethal environment, leaving little chance for survival. The aftermath of such an event would be a stark reminder of the devastating power of nuclear weapons and the importance of preventing their use. As if the initial blast and firestorm weren't enough, the detonation would release a lethal wave of radiation. This invisible killer would spread outwards from the blast zone, contaminating everything in its path. Those caught within the immediate vicinity of the blast would receive lethal doses of radiation within seconds. Further out, people would experience radiation sickness, a debilitating condition with long-term health effects. The invisible threat of radiation would linger long after the fires had died down. In the aftermath of the explosion, London would be unrecognizable. The once vibrant metropolis would be reduced to a smouldering ruin. Iconic landmarks like Buckingham Palace and the Houses of Parliament would be gone. Millions would be dead either from the blast, the fires, or radiation exposure. Those who survived the initial blast would face a desperate struggle for survival. With no food, water, or shelter, they would be left to fend for themselves in a radioactive wasteland. The radioactive fallout from the explosion wouldn't be confined to London. Carried by the wind, it would spread across the UK and beyond, contaminating vast swathes of land. This invisible threat would render entire regions uninhabitable. Crops would wither, water supplies would become contaminated, and the very air would be dangerous to breathe. The fallout would have a devastating impact on agriculture, infrastructure, and human health far beyond the initial blast zone. Section 7, a shroud over the Earth nuclear winter. This term describes the severe and prolonged global climatic cooling effect that is hypothesized to occur after widespread firestorms following a nuclear war. The detonation of a 1,000 kiloton nuclear weapon wouldn't just be a local catastrophe. The immediate impact would be devastating, obliterating everything within a vast radius. It would also have severe global consequences, affecting not just the immediate area but the entire planet. The explosion would send shockwaves through the atmosphere, altering weather patterns and climate systems, potentially triggering a nuclear winter. This phenomenon would be characterized by a dramatic drop in temperatures worldwide as the sun's rays are blocked by thick layers of smoke and soot. The massive firestorms ignited by the blast would release millions of tons of soot and smoke into the atmosphere. These particles would rise high into the stratosphere, where they could remain for years. This would block out the sun, creating a perpetual twilight and plunging the Earth into darkness. The lack of sunlight would disrupt photosynthesis, the process by which plants produce food, causing global temperatures to plummet. The sudden and severe cooling would lead to longer, harsher winters and shorter, cooler summers, drastically altering the planet's climate. The resulting climate change could lead to widespread crop failures, famine, and food shortages. With the agricultural systems in disarray, millions of people could face starvation and ecological collapse on a global scale. The loss of biodiversity, the collapse of ecosystems, and the extinction of countless species would be inevitable. The world as we know it would be irrevocably changed, and humanity would face an unprecedented crisis. Section 8. Decades of contamination. The radioactive contamination from a nuclear attack on London would persist for decades. The long half-lives of some radioactive isotopes mean that the affected areas would remain dangerous for generations to come. This long-lasting contamination would have a profound impact on the environment and human health. Cancer rates would skyrocket and birth defects would become commonplace. The land itself would be poisoned, making it difficult to rebuild and recover. Section 9. The long shadow of nuclear war. The devastation caused by a nuclear attack on London would serve as a stark reminder of the terrible power we possess. The human cost, the environmental damage, and the long-term consequences would be almost unimaginable. Such an event would not be confined to history books. It would cast a long shadow over humanity, shaping our future for generations to come. The fear of annihilation would hang over every international conflict, every political decision. Section 10. A plea for peace. The potential consequences of a nuclear attack on London or any major city are too horrific to contemplate. The only way to prevent such a catastrophe is through diplomacy, dialogue, and a commitment to peace. We must work together to reduce nuclear arsenals, strengthen international treaties, and build a world where such weapons are never used. The future of our planet, and indeed our very survival, depends on it. The time for action is now.